What is up, you beautiful, blessed boys and girls? This is Tyler Tote. Welcome to the channel. I'm really fired up for this one. I went down a deep rabbit hole for you guys on this one, and I found some pretty shocking stuff. There was a scientist by the name of Dr. Stanley Milgram back in the 1960s, conducted this experiment that's become pretty famous called the Milgram experiment. It's something that scientists and psychiatrists and people back in that day, before they did it, had a hypothesis of less than 1% of people would do this specific thing that they were asking them to do. Turns out two-thirds of people would do it. I believe this study reveals a ton about human nature, can reveal a ton about our own lives, how we can sort of see the matrix out there and learn how to cheat code our way through it, and really open up some great discussion points. So dive in with me. Let's hop in. So we're getting back in the 1960s, Dr. Stanley Milgram decided he was going to run an experiment. He was really trying to understand, to be honest, the Nuremberg trials. He was studying that and seeing, what happened in Nazi Germany. And I read a book a while back, a couple years ago. I got real kind of fascinated with this too, called Ordinary Men. And he wanted to understand the same thing I did as a curious human. How can seemingly ordinary guys go from, man, I'm just a plumber and going to help people, or I'm a doctor, or a carpenter, or a CEO, or fill in the blank, right? One day, and I've just been doing this for decades, and then all of a sudden, now I'm shooting other human beings in the head. Now all of a sudden, I'm throwing other human beings in the gas chamber. Now all of a sudden, I'm torturing human beings. I'm killing them, and during the Holocaust, just the most horrible things humans have ever done to other humans. How does this happen? And so he conducted this pretty amazing experiment that shines a pretty big light on this, in my opinion. So to break it down, here's what they did. They had a guy in a lab coat who was going to be in on it. And then they seemingly picked two random people, but one of the person was in on it too. So they would have these two guys draw straws, and they said, hey, this is just a learning game. We want to test at what point somebody will learn the best. So they would draw straws, and one guy would always get the straw that wasn't in on it. That would be the teacher. And the other guy would supposedly be the learner, but again, he's in on it. And so what this would look like is they'd say, hey, we have these a chart of 30 different rows, and you start at like 10-volt shock, and it goes up to 25, and then 40, and then 60, and you're going to go along. And as this guy standing behind you in the lab coat, who's apparently a scientist or knows what he's doing, tells the teacher, hey, he needs another shock to help him learn, they're going to see how far he'll go along. Now, they let it be known that at 250 volts, it can kill people. And as this goes along, again, they predicted 0.8% of people would go the full way to 400 volts, to where, man, the guy is like screaming and asking to stop. But if that scientist sitting behind him said, more, we need it, it's important, do it. They said, man, people aren't psychopaths. Nobody wants to hurt other people. And again, they predicted less than 1% would go all the way. So here's what happens. They run this experiment hundreds and thousands of times, and they always start off the same. Okay, this guy, the only one that's not in on it is the teacher. The guy in the lab coat's behind him. They say, hey, you got to memorize these things. He can't do it. They say, give him a shock. So he starts out, gives him a shock, and you might hear on the other end of this wall, he can't see the guy. There's a big barrier, but he would hear like, oh. Now, as this would progress, once they got up to 200 volts, 250, the guy would start screaming and say, this hurts, I'm in pain. And again, what they thought would always happen was the guy would say, hey man, I'm not doing this anymore. The guy or the girl that was the supposedly teacher, the one that's not in on it. They kept saying he was at some point before 200, 250, everybody outside of 1%, which they said were psychopaths, would not want to continue this. So here's what happened time and time again. 100% of the people went up to 250 volts. They went up to the point where the guy was actually screaming. All the way from, 40 to 150, 200 in that range. He's saying, oh, and it hurts. He's saying things like this. But because, and this is the key point, this guy in the lab coat behind him is, you have to keep going. You have to keep going. It's very important that we get this data. They don't even know who this guy is behind him, but he's trusted. He's wearing a lab coat. He must know what he's doing. He's an expert, right? So we got to trust these experts, right? So you probably see where I'm sort of going with this already, but it just became amazing to me. 100% of the participants hit 200 to 250 volts. At that point, only a third stopped when you went up to 275, and they had the guy start saying, I have a heart condition, please stop. And he's begging them to stop. I have a heart condition. Please, please stop. Again, he can't see him, but when he pushes the button, immediately he thinks he's shocking this guy on the other side, and the guy is yelling now, please stop, it hurts, please stop, I got a heart condition, please stop. And again, time and time again, 2/3 of the time, 67% of people, so 66% more than they thought, went the whole way to 400 volts. That 400th volt was labeled XXX, do not touch, danger. And because that guy in the lab coat told him, we need this, please keep going, 67% of people went all the way until, to be honest, the last 4 or 5 times they pushed it, they didn't hear anything on the other end. They would have, at that point, probably, if I'm in that situation, assumed the guy has died. Up until this point, he's screaming, he's yelling. It's progressed to the point now where he's saying, please don't hurt me. This hurts. And then at some point, I got to think when I'm reading about this study and I'm watching this, you just drew a straw at the beginning. So, seemingly in your mind, that could have been you. And this is the point I never understand. And I'm a curious human, but I don't know how other humans can treat other humans the way we do. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I'd like to think that if I was in this sort of situation, the first couple times the guy says, man, this hurts, and he's screaming, I'm going to turn to the guy in the lab coat and say, who are you? Show me some credential. Why should I trust you? This guy's hurting. I'm going to go help him. I don't know you. And you would think that more people would question things, that more people would just not assume that because he's wearing a lab coat, because they parade him on CNN or Fox News and say they're an expert, or they parade, oh, the experts say you got to do this 6 feet apart, stop, all these things, right? But it just goes to show, in my mind, human nature. And so once you understand this, and again, when I went through this, and time and time again, when you read about these ordinary men that happened to be in Nazi Germany, they just kept saying the same thing. I was following orders. There was a guy in a lab coat telling me to push the button, telling him to push him in, telling him to pull the trigger. I was just doing what I was told. A few big takeaways from this, and I'll just be very honest, I'll never be the same again after COVID. After going through what I went through, I'll literally never see the world the same way again. There was almost half the population demanding that if you didn't, not your body, your choice, if you didn't put an experimental thing in your body, you should lose your job. You should not be able to buy groceries. You should not be able to travel. You should, all this went out the door. I got the cops called on me multiple times, 3, 4 times, for doing pull-ups in my park alone, playing with my children in a park. Cops. And I just realized these people will turn on you in a second if somebody with authority is telling them this is what we do. And every day there was a death toll and a death ticker and you hate grandma if you're doing this or that, right? And now all the science has come out. Everything that people were getting banned for on YouTube, banned for on Twitter, banned for on all these things, 99% of it has come out. It wasn't a conspiracy theory, it's true. And so now they're saying, when we look back at this era of time, it just taught me something that seems to be very universal. I would have thought of the same thing. When COVID hits, dude, it's like 1 or 2%, maybe five, or sheep, and they'll just believe whatever experts tell them to believe. Maybe 95% are going to stop and question and say, I'm not pushing this button again. This guy's in pain. I'm not going to fire this person at my company because he doesn't want this shot. He's already had COVID. He has natural immunity. Show me a study that says that a vaccine is better than natural immunity, right? Nobody, half the people didn't think this way. And so, what can we learn from this? How do we use this moving forward? Well, number one, I mentioned it. I'm never the same again after COVID. One of my best friends, Zuby, told me, man, that's the reason he left the UK. He's like, I don't trust my fellow countrymen that now that, something like this happens again and all of a sudden they're telling people to turn on people. I don't trust that they won't just turn on people again, right? Like, I don't know. I never view the world in the same way again. And it just opened me up to how many people are just what you would call NPCs at this point, non-player characters. They just simply do what they're told. And why is this? Well, I think from an early upbringing, we're just, follow the rules, stay in the lines, color between, just do what you're freaking told all the time, never question anything. Like, you ever think like why it's just normal for human beings to just basically spend all their paycheck and just accept that I'm going to work 5 days a week to get two off, and just accept that I'm going to get 2 weeks vacation to work 50, and just accept that the best years of my life, I'm going to miss all my kids' stuff, and I'm just going to work this job I usually don't like. And maybe by the time I'm 65, I'm still healthy enough to enjoy a little bit on the other end with the little social security or retirement I might have. Like, why does just the majority of people accept this? That's just what they're told. That's just what they're programmed, right? And it's like they'll bring experts out that tell you got to invest in this, you got to put your money here, you got to, you deserve it, buy the car, the programming, all these things, right? And so the biggest takeaway from this stuff for me is you got to think about the way you think. And you're always being programmed. Look, even you watching me right here, you're being programmed. I'm coming into your subconscious. You're starting to think about different things. Every time you watch a podcast, every time you watch the news, every time you consume a book, you consume media, you are being programmed. So, what do you do with that information? Well, to me, it's very simple. I'm going to get in the Bible a ton. I'm going to listen to sermons a ton. I'm going to listen to smarter people than me a ton. I'm going to stay away from news and experts and a lot of the mainstream stuff. And if 100 people are running this way and only a few this way, I want to know why they're going this way, and I'm probably going to join them. As I look over the landscape and say, well, most Americans on average now, over 50% don't have $1,000 to their name. Their net worth is underwater. Their average credit card bill per household is $12,000 a family. That's credit card, which is insane to me. Most people are just getting by and they're just a part of this big moving system and they just do what they're told. In essence, there's just a big guy behind them in a lab coat just saying, just spend the money, you deserve it. Just do that, you deserve it. Maybe by the time you're 65, you deserve. And they just keep doing what they're doing. And so I'd ask you to question things. Really take a look at what kind of life do you want? I woke up at 34 years old. I really did. And I said, you know what, man, I don't see a ton of people that are super happy doing what I'm doing. I've put on 19 pounds my first 2 years working corporate. Don't necessarily love it, but yet I keep doing the same things over and over again. I keep getting the paycheck, spending the paycheck, getting the paycheck, spending the paycheck. In essence, I'm trading my whole life so that I can buy some of this stuff, and it doesn't make sense. So I just did a really simple exercise I'd urge anyone here to do today. Made a whole video about it. I'll link it below, but it's called Perfect Day. And if you didn't have to worry about money or ever trading your time for dollars, what would you do? What time would you wake up? What things would you work on? Who would you help? Who would you serve? How much time would you spend in your community? What would you work on? What would you do? Ask yourself. I listed hour by hour. I said, I want to wake up at this time. I want to work on these things. I want to put these things into the world. I want to help these kinds of people. From the first time I made that perfect day list, about 6.5 years ago, 7 years ago now, it's pretty much the exact life that I live right now. So if money was an option, this is what I do. And an amazing thing happened to me when I made that list. I realized I don't give a crap what other people think. And most of the decisions I'm making in my life are based off what I think other people think of me. And I just don't care anymore. Oh man, you're probably not worth that much, or you'd be driving a nicer car. I don't care. I drive an 11-year-old car. I don't care. You don't even have nice clothes or watches or anything. Yeah, I have zero. I don't think I bought myself a new anything, man, in a decade. I view money differently now. Money just buys me time. That's all it buys me. I don't need it to buy me stuff that often. I mean, there's some basic necessities I need to live. Outside of that, I want it to buy me time. So, how do you zoom back out when you start with that clear vision of exactly what you want out of life? I did this with my wife. We sat down and said, what's success to us? And we still continue to do this and pivot as our kids get into different stages of life. But it's, success to me is being able to drop my kids at school, be there for every event, be able to take a walk with her every day, be able to not be rushed and running all over all the time. What's it look like? So I just ask you to take a look at that. Don't just keep going the way that the masses go, because the masses are not going in a good direction. And people are easily programmed. And I think when you realize that and you look at what goes on here, that 2/3 of people they'll literally keep pushing this button when they're told to push a button that they perceive as killing someone that really could have been them if they had just drawn a different straw. The Milgram experiment shows me a lot that people will just be programmed to do anything. And if you don't want to be programmed, you have to think about the way you think. And so maybe you're a person that goes along with a lot of the mainstream narratives for a while, or you're probably not if you've been watching the channel, I hope. But think about the way you think. And I ask every time I see something on the news or a big event, I say, question. I don't just accept it. Now, look, not everything is a conspiracy theory. I think if you believe every conspiracy theory, you're an idiot. But in the same token, if you believe everything everybody tells you and is selling you, and just because the experts said it, that's what I'm going to do, you're also an idiot. And you need to take a look at what you're doing. You need to find a tribe of people that are also curious and question these things with you. So, the last part of this, and I end videos the same way every time, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. It broke my heart when I'm reading as this goes along. I said, they predict 1%. And I said, well, it must be a shocking study if they did this whole thing on it that I'm reading. So maybe it's 10%, 15% would actually kill somebody across from them, but it can't be 2/3. And man, 2/3. And so, you have to think about the way you treat people. What are you putting out into the world? We're all connected in my mind in some way. And that's why every day I could grow a lot bigger on social media if I just put out a bunch of divisive and negative stuff. Look, negative and divisive stuff sells. Turns out people like don't really like to learn as much as they like to like be outraged. And I just challenge you, if you're in that spot too, ask yourself why. Why do you fight with people online? Why do you argue back and forth? Why do you post divisive things? Why do you consume that kind of content? It's foolish. If you're not logging offline every single day and saying, man, I feel like better, I learned things, or I put good things out into the world, or whatever, then don't log online. And that would include don't watch my channel, man. I have a couple people that tell me I don't like you, this or that. Awesome, man. Not everybody's meant for everybody. I ain't trying to be the most viewed guy. I'm trying to help a few people. So, audit the way that you feel, your energy, your mindset, where it goes after you consume these things. Realize everything is programming you some way or the other. And then just be cognizant of how you treat people, what you put out into the world. I saw a lot of people turn on a lot of people during COVID. I couldn't believe it, to be honest. I still can't. It really did change the way I view the world. But I hope we learn something from it. I hope we learn that just because a dude walking up in a lab coat says, trust the experts, that you have to wear a mask when you enter the restaurant, but not when you sit down. You have to wear a mask, and we're going to close churches and gyms because that COVID's there. But dude, you can go to casinos. Yeah, you can't. You're good there, man. You can smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol. Like nobody questioned a lot of these things, right? So start peeling it back and start saying, you know what, man, maybe I'm going to think for myself. And I had a tweet go absolutely mega viral. Elon Musk commented a couple years ago. And I said, if all your beliefs and all your values align with one political party, they are not your beliefs and they are not your thoughts. And I see this time and time again, and it's so foolish, man. It's like if you can't admit, if you really like Donald Trump and Republicans, and you can't admit that there's things that he does that you don't like, you're programmed. You're a sheep. Other way, if you got the Trump deranged syndrome and the guy, like, anything he does, they find a way to negatively spin it, and you can't name a couple things that he's doing better than the other administration, then dude, same thing. You're a sheep. And you need to think about the way you think. And look, it's in these people's best interest, in my mind, to keep us very divided. And there's many reasons for that I don't have time to get into on this video. But man, we're all human beings. We're all connected. And I would hope that if they ran this Milgram experiment again, and you were the one that drew the straw, that you would just pause and think, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I continuing to push this button and hurt another human being? Why do I wake up and just go online and seek out negative things and yell at people? Why do I do that? Why do I just trust everything that comes into my mind from these different sources? Why don't I question those? Why am I not curious? Why don't I ask more questions? Why do I keep working a job that I just hate and I tell everybody I hate and I'm miserable, but I just keep spending all the money I make and I have no path to get out? Why don't I change that? So start to think about the way you think, start to take some time, start to plan your life the way that a CEO would plan a business. I know it's a different kind of video today and one that got a little dark. And again, when I started reading and studying this, I could not believe it. But check it out for yourself. The Stanley Milgram experiment. I don't know if they've ever run anything since then. I couldn't find anything in the last 60 years that anybody's ever done this again. I would hope that as humanity goes along, that number would drastically reduce and we could all get a little more together and realize that we are connected in some kind of way. To me, it's that we're all God's creatures, and man, humans share this planet. There's no downside to being kind, and we ought to love one another and build one another up. That's where I'm always going to go. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Go have the best day of your life.